Good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be bringing to you today Coffee with the Farmer and Resource Manager, because today we have a whole lot of resource managers with us, and it's going to be a really special presentation. It's very different, nothing that we've done so far. And so I hope that you will stay through the entire time that we're on today, because we've got lots of different things to bring to you. Again, I'm Mary Kimball. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Land-Based Learning. And today we are back with one person who you'll recognize, and that's Dave Feliz from the Elkhorn Slough Reserve. And he has got some guests with him today also from the Elkhorn Slough Reserve, who are going to be talking about, really focused today on water quality and what kinds of things that the Elkhorn Slough Reserve does as part of a much larger reserve system around the country to monitor our water quality. Again, we think about jobs in agriculture and natural resources. Water, whether you're in California or whether you're anywhere in this country, water quality is always going to be at the very top of the list for a lot of different kinds of opportunities, and especially those that are outside. So for people who think about, I want to be doing something outside, I want to be doing something with natural resources, I want to be out in the environment, I want to be doing science, all of those different things coming together, you're going to learn a lot today about the kind of opportunities there are. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Feliz, who you saw last week. He's going to introduce himself again and then introduce his team who's going to be doing the presentation. So Dave, take it away.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you all again. And yes, I'm the manager of the Elkhorn Slough Reserve, which is a national estuarine research reserve. And so this is where NOAA partners with a state agency, and they do that at the sites around the continent. And our partner here is California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So these reserves were set up to conduct research in estuaries. And so one of the programs that happens system-wide is called the System-Wide Monitoring Program, or SWAMP. And a big part of that is monitoring water quality. And so today we have John Haskins, our water quality scientist, here at the reserve. And he's going to tell you about our program. And I just want to point out that everything he's doing, all the protocols are consistent throughout the entire network. And so we have the same information being gathered the same way from Hawaii to Alaska to Puerto Rico to Elkhorn Slough. And so with that, here's John Haskins.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Yeah, like you said, my name's John Haskins. I do with the water quality here. I'm managing the two programs, the water quality programs we have. And the one that Dave mentioned is the one that's consistent throughout all the reserves, where we have an instrument out that collects temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, and depth. And all of those are collected at 4 different sites every 15 minutes.
Ooh.
And those sites have been out. There's 2 of those sites that have been out since 1995. So we've got a lot of data. Maybe if I can share my screen, I can go through this.
Go for it. You also have a lot of books, I see. A lot of books.
Yes, lots of books behind me that I refer to all the time.
Of course you do.
Yeah. Let's see if I can share the right one.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. And are you seeing?
Yep.
We're seeing your notes along the right-hand side too.
Okay. Which screen are you seeing now?
Not the presentation part.
Not the presentation.
Yeah, the preparation screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it'll work. We can see we can see the slide you're on, and we can also see the slides along the left that are coming up. So
okay, so maybe that's better than the
Yes.
seeing the notes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, as I was saying, we've got so we've got two programs that are running. That one that I was talking about, where we have 4 sites that are out that are sampling every 15 minutes. We also have a secondary program that goes out monthly. So and that's different because they aren't sites that are out on a permanent basis, but these we just go out to monthly. We visit and we collect actual physical water samples, and then we can bring those into the lab and get nutrients. Because on the instrument, we don't have any nutrients that we get off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the questions that I get all the time when I tell people that I do water quality monitoring is, how is the water quality?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were kind of struggling of like, okay, how do we answer that question? And so we came up with a report card. So I do also just want to mention that we depend very highly on volunteers, and they help a tremendous amount on going out and getting the collecting the water samples themselves. This is a little map of showing where the throughout the slough, all of the sites that we go to. So these are all the sites that we go to on a monthly basis. And then this one shows where those permanent stations are located. So we have these 4 permanent stations in red: Azevedo Pond, North Marsh, South Marsh, and Vieira.
So why are there, just real quick, John, why are there 4 different locations chosen? What are the reasons to choose multiple locations to take monitoring samples from?
Yeah, good question. So we wanted to kind of get a wide distribution and to be able to look at the various parts of the slough. So Vieira Mouth and South Marsh and Azevedo Pond are the first 2 that were chosen. Those are the ones that have been going since 1995. Okay. South Marsh is a site that is located in the reserve portion of the entire slough, and that gets fully tidal, and it's a lower impacted site. It's a site that does not have direct runoff from farm fields, ag fields right nearby. Mm-hmm. The Azevedo Pond site was chosen. You can't really see on this map, but there is ag that's right there, right upstream of there. It's getting directly impacted by the farm runoff. So, and it's further up the slough, so it has a different region of the slough. So we kind of chose those 2 sites to be able to get kind of impacted versus non-impacted site.
Got it.
And then the other 2 are very similar in that sense. North Marsh is an impacted site. It's behind a water quality structure. There's a lot of inputs from farms nearby, where the Vieira Mouth site is right at the mouth of the slough. It gets a lot of flushing. It's a very, very different site and so to have those 4 different stations, we kind of get a big spread of what the different variety of water quality is in the area.
Great, perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. So as Dave mentioned, we are a part of a national program. So we're just one in 24 or so that are across, maybe even more, that are across the whole U.S., including some of the Great Lakes. They've come on in the last couple of years. But you can see the majority of the reserves are on the East Coast, just by physical and geography is that there's less estuaries on the West Coast than there are on the East Coast.
Okay, I'm going to stop you again, and I just realized that I didn't ask Dave about this last week. What is the definition of estuary or estuarine? What makes it different than a lake or a pond or a river or whatever? What is an estuary?
Right. An estuary is where the water meets the sea.
Perfect.
And so it's where the river and the ocean come together, where they meet. And so there's a tremendous variability in that definition.
Mm-hmm.
Alaska looks very, very different from Hobos Bay, Puerto Rico, but they're both estuaries.
Mm-hmm.
And the flushing is very different. The volume of water coming down, we're considered an estuary, but we have Carneros Creek, which is the tiny little creek. San Francisco Bay is also a gigantic estuary, and it has the San Joaquin and the Sacramento River, giant rivers that are coming in, draining half of the state, coming into one bay, where we're this tiny little creek coming in and draining a very small watershed, but they're still both estuaries.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So testing the water quality on these estuaries is a very, very important thing. It's sort of like getting going to the doctor and getting your temperature at the doctor all the time. You want to constantly do that, to constantly monitor the health of your body. And as I mentioned, we've kind of tried to develop this water quality index, so a grading system to be able to synthesize all of this data that we're getting. We're getting all of these nutrients, all of this, all these physical parameters, the turbidity, dissolved oxygen, pH, and what does it all mean? How do we say if the water is doing better or worse? So we borrowed this index that has already been developed by the Canadian Water Quality, and it's a system that works based on thresholds. So for each parameter that you're looking at, you kind of decide if it goes above this threshold, the water quality is bad. If it goes below the threshold, it's pretty good. And these are all scientifically defensible thresholds. So each parameter, this kind of gives a list of all the parameters that we're looking at that go into this index. And what the only two that I want to look at, I want to point you out to, is dissolved oxygen and pH are not just a threshold of a high, but it's also a threshold of a low. So pH, you don't want it to go below a certain amount and get too acidic, but you also don't want it to go above a certain amount and get too basic. And the same is with dissolved oxygen. It's obviously bad if it gets too low, you get hypoxia or low oxygen. But if it gets too high, that's hyperoxia. That's a bad sign too. So those are the only two parameters that we look at both ends.
Okay.
And so this grading system, this index, without getting too much into the weeds of the math, but we're looking at scope, frequency, and amplitude. So we're looking at the scope, how many of the parameters that we're looking at, how many of them exceed the threshold, the frequency, how often it will exceed that threshold, so one particular parameter, and then the amplitude also is taken into play. So if it goes above the threshold just barely, if the threshold's 15 and it goes 16, that's going to get it's going to get a much worse grade if it's 100 rather than 15. So it kind of that's very important, because you're obviously much worse if you're going way above. So when you put it all together, you normalize it all of those parameters, and you normalize it from a score to a 0 to 100 that everybody can understand, and you can kind of get on this scale of an A through an F. And then this would what the report card looks like. And we do one year. So this we're taking monthly samples. So this will be on a water year, and you'll look at from October through September, and all of the samples that were taken, all of the parameters that we were looking at, combining them all together. And for each site, you can get a score and a grade. And you can see this was how we did it originally. We would just put it out make a pamphlet and make a map, and you can kind of right away see the main channel is getting pretty good grades, and this lower estuary, this southern estuary, there are bad students. They're the ones that we need to really work on. Maybe they could read some of these books.
Right.
Start studying a little harder. But they're the ones, the southern estuary is getting all this runoff from the Salinas River. So it's getting a lot of ag, a lot of urban runoff, and it's getting very little flushing. There's no flushing that's going on down here. That's all happening up here. So the flushing where the bees that we're getting are in the South Marsh and Vieira that are the highest flushing. And then again, this is kind of the top of the slough, very limited flushing that's getting a worse grade. So that's kind of a very common theme every year. The sites that have lower flushing get worse grades. So we've put this whole thing, instead of a trifold, we put this whole thing onto the web, and we can access all of this data and not just look at 1 year, but you can look at multiple years. And you can look at all of the sites, and let's see. And when you tap on one site, why did it disappear? You're there. So when you tap on one site, you can see the overall score in the middle, and then you can see each parameter, what score they got, and you can see the graph will show up on the right-hand side. The graph will show up of for that water year going from October through September. And I think this was looking at dissolved oxygen. So the two lines are the threshold, and that's where we want the oxygen to be in between those two lines. So that's why this got an F for dissolved oxygen, because a lot of the samples were below that limit.
So John, I mean, what do you do with this information? Like, I know your job is water quality monitoring and providing all of this information, but then what, maybe that's what you're going to talk about next, but what do the reserve managers and kind of the other folks do with this information because I'm assuming that the goal is to improve the water quality
right.
over time. So, and maybe that's, like I said, maybe that's something you're going to talk about. It looks like local restoration improves water quality is coming up. So maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I just wanted to make sure I understand kind of what the next phases are.
Yeah. So we do want to share this to both the managers and to the farmers, to the managers, so that they can be able to figure out what actions to take, what regulations to put out to be able to improve the water quality, and then when they do take some management actions, we can look into the future as to say, okay, did anything happen? And how did the water quality change after that management strategy was implemented? And same with the farmers, we can do the same thing of sharing this data that we can, if they do different management actions, they put in a sediment basin or a bioreactor. A bioreactor is where it will be the water will collect in a certain area, and then they'll encourage the bacteria to grow that consumes a lot of the nutrients. And so we'll be able to see with this monitoring, before and after that reactor was put in, if the water quality improves or not.
Yes.
And one report we did put out, so we're constantly trying to analyze this data and try to see what the trends are over time, to be able to look at what past actions have happened and learn from those actions, like which were the good ones and which were the ones that had the most benefit. So just last year we had a student come out, and she helped us look at all of this data, 30 years of the data, and basically found that there was not a lot of correlation between just the weather and the oceanography that was going on, but more what was driving it was these sites that were highly impacted sites, and the sites behind these tide gates. Those are the sites that had the worst water quality. But we did see in some cases that, like, this is exactly what goes to your question. So there, this was up in the upper watershed towards the Carneros Creek, where there's been a lot of restoration in the past, where they've either reduced the farm input or reduced the amount of nutrients coming out, and you can see this is just a graph looking at nitrate concentrations over time, and you can see in the 2000s these are 3 different sites that are up in the upper watershed up there, but you can see a general decline of nitrate concentrations that, and I think some of the restoration that happened was in this time frame, the early 2000s, and you can see that overall now the nitrate concentrations are much lower. So
Wow.
that's a really good thing we could see. We can say, okay, hey, it's worth putting in the effort to do this restoration because it does improve water quality.
So just real quickly, for folks who might be wondering where nitrates are coming from the farm fields, that is coming from fertilizers, correct, John?
Yeah.
So fertilizers that farmers are utilizing for whether they're utilizing strawberries, farming strawberries, there might be, I don't know if there's any rangeland in the area, it could be coming from cattle manure. What are some of the sources from an agricultural perspective for nitrate?
Yeah, so the nitrate, when they're adding on fertilizers onto the field, they're trying to add as much as they possibly can to be able to give the plants, make sure that plants have enough nutrients to be able to grow. but they don't know, they have no idea when the rain is going to come and or how much. And so they'll try to time it, and they're trying to time it with the plant growth, but and the plant needs, when the plant, that particular plant needs those nutrients. But they want to put on as much as possible, so that make sure the plants have as all that they need. And so anything that's excess that the plants aren't using will wash off and drain off and go eventually find its way down into the slough. A lot of the farms do now have what I mentioned was a sediment basin, which is where they'll find it at the lowest point on the farm. They'll create essentially a lake where the water will come down and be able to slow down for a little while, and give a chance for, that's where you would put your bioreactor. That's where you'd put they put in wood chips to feed the bacteria, and a bioreactor is essentially bacteria that's breaking down those excess nutrients that are coming in. Other things that will help reduce that nutrient load coming down is if that water can pass through some sort of riparian corridor, go through some other kind of plants, or a natural,
like a buffer strip of some sort, and filter through the soil, but also those plants that are growing on the hillside can start taking up some of that excess nutrients. So, and those are some of the kinds of projects that you guys have been working on over all these years. I know I've seen a few of them. I've seen a few of those ponds, the bioreactors that you're talking about. I've certainly seen the filter strips, and I know that there's been a lot of work done in that time frame, past 10, 15 years. And it's great to see that there's an impact here. That's the whole point, right? The goal of restoration.
Yeah.
So, very good.
Right.
So did you want to, is there anything else on here, or did you want to switch to Fuller?
Yeah, I wanted to switch to Fuller, but do you see him on the?
Do we see Fuller?
Yes.
Yes,
we do have him on.
Yeah, he doesn't have his video on. So Fuller, if you're listening, turn on your video.
I think someone has to enable my video.
Well,
yes, I'm working on it. Sorry.
No.
Look, that's just his mute, I think. Uh-oh, we got a dog. You just muted yourself. Okay, so let's see. Fuller, let's see. The only thing we can do for you is mute and unmute. And actually,
he should be able to start it now. There you go.
Yeah, there he goes.
Right.
He's still on mute. Oh, can we hear you, Fuller?
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Excellent.
Good morning. I'm down here at the South Marsh site. I will give you a quick little look here. Beautiful, sunny day. You can hear many geese.
Nice.
Oh, beautiful.
We are at the South Marsh site, like John had mentioned, and this is one of the water quality sites. Right here we have one of the sondes that measures all of the different parameters that he was talking about when it comes to dissolved oxygen, turbidity, pH. And inside of this case, as you can see, there's a lot of biofoul, and we have to come out here and switch out these sondes, or else the probes kind of get so dirty that they're affected, and So we have quite a few of these, and we switch them out on a monthly basis. And so I brought a clean one out to show you guys.
Ah.
So this is what the computer looks like, where we're able to detect some of this information. It has temperature, salinity, all sorts of good stuff. And this right here is the case to the sensor that collects all of the data. Without this case, all of these probes can get pretty messed up. And as you can see, there was a bunch of biofoul. They've even found octopus and other like crabs and stuff inside. So here we have the pH probe. You can see it. It has a little bulb on the end, and it uses light to measure the pH. We also have the dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and turbidity probes. And right here in the middle is this wiper. And every 15 minutes, this sensor is taking data. And every 15 minutes, this wiper is actually wiping the sensors. So it is able to take consistent, clean data. And so that is why we go through and take the precautionary steps to make sure the sensors are cleaned off once a month and the batteries are all spick and span. But this is one of the 4 sites, like John had mentioned, that enables us, or that has been one of the sites where we've been taking water quality for over 20 years. So now that we have these new instruments, it's a lot easier for us to get out to more sites, and tells a way bigger story. And so you guys got to hear a bit of that with the water quality report card. I'm going to go ahead and show you this sonde a little bit more, just because, or unless John is ready to fly out, or I didn't say fly.
Yeah. So Fuller, how much, how much would one of those things cost? I mean, I think about, the old school where, like, my brother worked at UC Aquatic Talks for 10, 15 years as a water quality specialist. And he was out there doing, measurements by hand, right, all the time. And this is a very different level of technology, but I'm assuming is a lot more expensive, and also, can break, like you said. And so what's the cost of something like that? Do you know?
I personally haven't been involved with purchasing this equipment, but I do know the sondes they have to run for, I want to say, over $1,000, and the probes are probably several $100s each a piece. The battery is really expensive, and the company YSI, Yellow Spring Instrument, they're located in Ohio, and I know they are the distributor for all of the NERR sites for collecting our water quality. So that enables us to keep consistent data. And they're the company that all of the NERR sites use. And so keeping that standard is pretty key. And I think that keeps YSI in good business.
I'm sure it does.
So I think I could probably answer that question. If they're over $10,000 for the whole thing.
Right.
And
I had a feeling it looked pretty expensive.
Yeah,
pretty impressive.
and they include telemetry equipment to send that information via satellite to the national database. And
Okay.
so it's every 15 minutes all of this information is
And
getting
so
sent
everything is
across
done
the country.
automatically. The only thing that you are doing out there is, as you said, Fuller, you're going out to check it, make sure that it's not getting full of animals and gook and everything else, so that it's reading correctly and so on. But in general, that thing, once it's in, it's doing all of the work, really.
Exactly, and it stays in, and we do our pre-calibration to make sure all of the sensors are working correctly before we deploy it. Afterwards, we recover the instrument, and we run through the same post-calibration procedure to make sure it's still reading all of those baseline data that keeps the instrument consistent. So Yeah, it's essentially just making sure the instrument's working properly and going through the procedure, calibrating the instrument, and then uploading the data onto the ESNER water quality database like John had been talking about earlier.
So I'm not sure if John's ready, but why don't you tell us your background? Tell us where you went to school, where you're from, that little bit of that.
Yes, I am a recent California State University Monterey Bay graduate. I studied marine science and minored in statistics. I recently was accepted to Moss Landing Marine Labs in the chemical oceanography lab, so I'm going to start in the fall of 2020, pursuing a master's through San Jose State. And I met John this summer working in the Federated States of Micronesia, monitoring plastics accumulating in a large island chain. It's called Ulithi Atoll. It's the 4th largest atoll in the world. I moved out to California 8 years ago. When I turned 18, I drove out and started going to community college and working, and worked a ton of different jobs. And I am the happiest I've ever been working here. So I'm happy to be here on the reserve, working to conserve and preserve, this beautiful land, and watching all of the restoration projects that are going on. It's extremely eye-opening. Also seeing the collaboration between several agencies and, being a part of this growing education network is pretty amazing. Like here we are on this Zoom call. We've never met before, and you're in another part of California, and I'm sitting in the Elkhorn Slough. So yeah.
It's
a beautiful
great,
thing.
and I appreciate that your story about just getting out to California and starting out at community college, which so many of our students do, and they people have such a focus on going to 4-year schools right off the bat, but here you are, you've traveled that road literally. You are now going on and doing your master's degree, and you don't have to start at a 4-year institution, right? And you got to learn along the way and figure out what you really were most interested in, and probably, like you said, with all those jobs, that helped you to figure out that path. So that's great.
Highly recommend community college. It really teaches you what you do and don't want to be doing. You really have to work hard. It's just a completely different beast. So any students out there, just know, highly recommend it. You're still able to work and be at home. So looks like John's
ready.
jumping on.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can, John. Yes.
Oh, excellent. So you can see the drone we have here. This is the guy I'm going to fly.
Looks like a little robot.
Yeah. This is a DJI Mavic. And if I can share my screen again, I can move over. Hopefully we can get the screen.
There we go.
That is coming from the drone itself.
Oh my goodness. Yep. Oh, I think, yeah.
You see that? You can see my feet?
Yes, we can see your feet. Very nice shoes. Excellent.
All right.
There he goes.
Actually, I said that you should put your seatbelts on and put your trays to your upright position. But yeah, we can, this is, what we're looking at now is the slough here. Here's the visitors.
Yes. Oh yes, I've been there.
Okay. And you can see, go up a little bit higher. We got some, a bunch of cliff swallows.
Yes.
Going
I was wondering what those were. That's great. Couldn't tell if it was bugs or birds.
Yeah. And
there's the salt shakers. People may have passed by those on Highway 1. You might recognize those if you've driven along from south of Santa Cruz. Yeah.
I can actually zoom in a little bit. Is that where
Yep, there you go. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, so that's the mouth of the slough. That's the bay, the Monterey Bay out there. And I'm going to go out a little bit further. We can see where, so we're going out as if we're going out the to the overlook. Are you guys still getting this?
Yes, yep, we're getting it. Yeah.
The water quality site that
Is this at low tide right now,
Fuller was
John?
just at. See if we could actually
See if you can find
see
Fuller. Yeah.
where he was. Pretty low tide right now, yeah. And this is the this is what we call South Marsh, and this area is in the reserve itself. We did have a pretty good low tide this morning, and so yeah, it's pretty well drained out. This was a restoration that they tried. You can see it looks, there's a lot of mud flat. And that is the water quality site that Fuller was just at.
Oh. That was a little walk that he had to get out there.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Might feel this. I think we can see Fuller there.
Yep, he's waving. Very good. We see his blue shirt. There's his blue shirt on the end there. That's great.
Yeah. So that is one of the permanent stations where we're getting a fully tidal. You can see it's just off of the main channel, so it's getting a full tidal, flushing of water coming in and out. But you can see this green.
Yes.
This green up here is the ulva. And oh wow, I hear the train.
I was going to say the train is coming just in time for its cameo appearance. Yes.
We time that perfectly. So a lot of that excess nutrients that are coming into the slough is growing that ulva. So that excess nutrients, that's one primary indicator of excess nutrients coming into the system is ulva coming in.
That yellowish, that bright yellowish, limeish green color that we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to see if I could see the.
Is it algae? Like what is it exactly? What is, you call it ulva, but what kind of plants, or what is it exactly?
It's called a macroalgae. So yeah, it's the common name is sea lettuce.
Oh, yes, sea lettuce. Okay, I haven't seen that out there. Oh, there's the train. Nice job.
Yeah, there we go. And that is, that is one of the things that's a big dike that cuts off a lot of the slough.
Yes.
See if I could follow it as it's coming through, but that creates some of the poor water quality behind that dike. Essentially, you can see there's some marsh on the other side, but it's a lot more mud flat where on the inside there. this inside area, let's see if I could back out again. This inside area was historically, this was actually dried out completely. And that is why it's become a mud flat. It was dried out, diked off completely. There was actually cattle running around out there. And then in the 80s, they tried to restore it. And it worked out partially, but there's still a lot of mud flat out there, and not the marsh. The marsh has to be at a much higher elevation. And so when you dike it and dry it out, which is what they did historically, that area sinks. But like a sponge, when you dry out a sponge, it gets smaller and shrinks down.
Yes.
But when you add water again, it's not like a sponge. When you add water again, it doesn't just swell back up. It stays low. And so that's too low for the marsh to grow.
And the marsh is what you really want in terms of a really ecologically functioning estuarine system. I would imagine, right? You want all those plants. You want all of that, kind of what you were referring to earlier as your bioreactor. This is your natural bioreactor.
It's essentially a natural bioreactor, yeah. So you want that marsh. This area that I'm focusing on in the background now, that white, that tan area, is a whole area that we've just restored.
Yes.
So that used to look like what you can see in the foreground. That used to be all just mud flat. Now that background, unfortunately, I can't fly over there, but it is a huge restoration that we did where we elevated we added a whole bunch of sediment, brought in the sediment, brought it back up to what the marsh likes to live at. And so that's going to is already coming back, and marsh is already, the plants are starting to come back there, and that will function as a natural marsh in the future.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to close. We've had a lot of your time today. We spent some extra time because this is so incredibly interesting, and you guys are such a great team there. Fuller did a great job of talking about the importance and why this is the importance of doing this, and why he's so excited to be a part of it. And I just really thank all of you for showing us kind of a little bit of a picture, literally and figuratively, of the work that you do, how incredibly, at this point, technologically connected it is. And a lot of people don't think about this kind of work as being an area where they can get so involved in technology as well as with the natural world, and seeing all of those different pieces, reading them, understanding them, reacting to them, and making change to improve our environment. So thanks to all of you, Dave, John, Fuller. We're so appreciative of all your time, both last week and this week. And for folks who have never been to the Elkhorn Slough, if this has not made you interested in going, you absolutely, at some point when shelter in place is done, they've got a beautiful, like you showed it there, visitor center, there's walkways, there's all kinds of interesting signage to learn more about the slough and the reserve system. If you people who live nearby obviously can get involved in volunteering out there. You showed the great pictures of that. It's literally a national treasure. And if you haven't been out there, go check it out, because it's a beautiful place. You can go kayaking on the Elkhorn Slough. There's rental kayaks there. So lots and lots of great things to do. So thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. Unless there's any final words, we'll let you go.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
it's great to see you. Thank you very much.